Chapter 6 is, in my opinion, probably one of the most important chapters of the book. If there's a video you skip, this isn't the one to skip. And I'll try to make this as brief as possible, but it's really important. So it sort of starts off with building the republic. Okay. In the aftermath of the revolution, the founders are forced to form government, right? So what does that look like? What do they have to go off of? There's never been a nation founded upon the consent of the governed. So they had the Enlightenment to go off of. And so they're referencing popular sovereignty, republicanism, constitutionalism, et cetera, all the things that were discussed in previous videos. So the first draft of a government that they come up with is called the Articles of Confederation. And like the first draft of most things, it's not great, okay? It created a weak federal government and extremely strong state governments amongst the 13 states. So it essentially made a central government, a federal government, think of it today like Washington, D.C., that was incapable of governing or providing a unity to the United States of America. It could make laws, but it couldn't enforce them. It could ask for taxes to be levied and taken up. It couldn't enforce it. It could not regulate commerce. It could not enforce treaties with other nations, et cetera, et cetera. And so what the founders did was they said, we're really fearful of a strong, powerful central government that could oppress us like a king. So let's create a government that has essentially no power to do that. And what they found was that wasn't going to work. And the event that showed the founders we have a huge problem was an event known as Shays' Rebellion. Okay. So after Shays' Rebellion, an uprising of former Continental Army veterans who had not been paid for their service, the leaders of the 13 states get together in Philadelphia and they will form what becomes known as the Constitutional Convention. And here is where they will come up with the contract between us as the American citizens and our government in Washington, D.C., our national capital today. This is the three branches, the executive, legislative, and judicial. This is checks and balances. This is separation of powers. This is the House and the Senate, the Great Compromise. This is the creation of the Supreme Court and the American presidency. And what the founders did, which was brilliant, is that they created this system in 1787, the United States Constitution, that still works today and has the ability to be amended when we need to make major changes that apply to all citizens in all the states. But essentially, the structure of the three branches, checks and balances, separation of powers, still works today. And it's changed a lot, but that structure is still there. And that's pretty astounding, is that they came up with this. Now, when they wrote this document, there were a couple of individuals that you've heard of before that were really instrumental in writing it. The first being Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton from New York was instrumental in forming the Constitution at the convention. The second was James Madison from Virginia. Although there is no one author for the Constitution, these two men are integral in sort of formulating the opinions and the consensus to get this document ratified the way that it looked. And the thing you have to understand about this is these were men who believed that the Republic could survive if great men were chosen to make great decisions on the behalf of us. Remember, education levels were low. We were a very spread out republic of 2.9 million people at that point in 13 states, all along the Atlantic coast. And Madison and Hamilton said this will work because neither of them really trusted the people like us. They said they're emotional, they're turbulent, they're easily swayed. And so we need a powerful republic that is insulated from the direct will of the popular people. And that was the brilliance of creating a republic in 1787. But there were people that were fearful of this because as weak as the Articles of Confederation was, the Constitution was equally as strong. It frightened people like Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was in France. He was our ambassador there from 83 to 89. And he was terrified at the amount of power that was being given to the federal government. And there were two things that he wanted to see change, and then he would get on board, at least in its infancy. One was he wanted a Bill of Rights. He said there has to be a list of freedoms that the people have that the government can never take away. And that would be added to appease the group of people who did not support the Constitution, known as the Anti-Federalists, of which Jefferson was one of the loudest opponents. He said, give me a Bill of Rights and I'll be okay. That was given. The first 10 amendments. We all know how that begins with Congress shall enact no law abridging the freedom of speech, religion, petition, assembly, etc. Right? So if you like those, you can thank Jefferson for demanding that they be added. The second thing that Jefferson didn't like was that, and this is something that's changed, the 22nd Amendment has changed this in the 20th century, is that he didn't like the fact that there were no term limits on the president. He felt that the fact that the president could be elected, as he said, in perpetuity, meaning forever, every 4 years, just keep getting reelected. He said that it's like a monarch first, and it's going to be handed down almost by birth from one dad to another going forward, and then we have a monarchy in everything but name. But he was assured by people like Madison, his friend, that that would not be the case, and so he quieted his opposition to that. And for over 150 years, we never had a president serve more than 2 terms. And that was because of the great example left by our first president, George Washington, who said 2 terms is enough for any man, and we need a change in leadership because we need other ideas. And everybody followed that until Franklin Roosevelt did not in the early years of the 20th century for reasons like the Great Depression, World War II, etc. Okay, after Franklin Roosevelt's death in 1945, the nation felt perhaps we should make this 2-term limit official, and they ratified the 22nd Amendment. Okay. Real quickly, with George Washington's presidencies, he set a great foundation for the nation with his first 2 terms. First of all, he let Alexander Hamilton guide the Treasury and guide Congress into establishing a somewhat stable economy, which was a major issue through Hamilton's financial plan of the creation of a national bank, the establishment of protective tariffs, and the assumption of the debt of the states, and the advocation of a tax on alcohol, which of course led to the Whiskey Rebellion. But secondly, Washington established a decent foundation in foreign policy, saying you don't align yourselves with turbulent nations like France that had just undergone the French Revolution. And instead, he said, you align yourselves with these stable nations that are the best partners, whether that be militarily or financially, with the United States, and that was Great Britain. And here's where you can earn 5 points on your next paper that you turn in for me. If you put this at the very beginning before you start your paper, answer this question for me. And you can just put the answer to it. You don't have to put the question. There were 12 congressmen who, when George Washington gave his farewell address, his goodbye speech to the nation, they did not vote to approve it. They didn't like it. And that's crazy because like George Washington was like, him and Jesus were like neck and neck for like the most popular person in America during this time. I say that jokingly, but really, like you could not say anything bad about George Washington. I mean, one of those 12 congressmen who did not vote to approve his farewell address because he felt it was far too pro-British and that Washington was the puppet of Britain was a guy from Tennessee that you might have heard of by the name of Andrew Jackson.